Welcome to Newswire. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. Today, I'm excited to be here with you, sitting in a little different space, but that's okay. It's still the same information. Before we get any farther into today's Newswire segment, I want to let you know about the Impact Driven Leader Summit. It is on May 7th and 8th, Spokane, Washington, the Davenport Grand Hotel. I would love for you to be there. Join myself and so many others. We have a great lineup of speakers, and I'm excited to share them with you. So go to theimpactdrivenleader.com in order to reserve your spot. You better get it before it is gone. And again, can't wait to see you there. Let's get into today's Newswire.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about, so far this, I would say, presidency, which we're now, believe it or not, only 20 days in.
That's crazy. It feels like much longer.
I mean, as people have shared, it feels like years. Like they've gotten more more chains rattled, cages rattled, and stuff done in 20 days than what I think people expected and or we've seen in I don't know if there's ever been, probably going back to FDR when he put the 100-day plan in and kind of that started a trend, as we've seen anything with so much momentum in the first couple of weeks.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, between, the tariff wars, quote unquote, we just have into effect today with steel and aluminum. What's the play there, Tyler, with the steel and aluminum tariffs?
Well, I mean, my guess would be, as I've done a little bit of reading, a little bit of investigating, is the bigger thing that we're seeing there is of some of these commodities that we source from a lot of countries, specifically China. Can we put tariffs on them so we can drive more domestic production? Yeah. Steel and aluminum are one of those commodities, no different than agricultural commodities, that, it's specifically a commodity, meaning there isn't a value add between different countries, different production standards. And so if we can say, hey, let's put tariffs on stuff that's incoming and drive some of the internal production, that's going to drive some jobs, that's going to benefit industries. The exact play that I think, Trump is looking at is really one of a bigger, how can he start to put out these tariffs and get people to come to the table and let's have conversations?
Yeah. I mean, tactically, strategically, I mean, we'll have to see how it all plays out especially with China, but with Mexico and Canada, it seemed like we're able to delay and strategically, have some sort of in our favor, the things that we want make happen, which we discussed on previous episodes, a stronger border, right? To mitigate the amount of drugs and illegals coming into the country.
I mean,
start to play out.
One of our largest allies, who is, just kind of getting some information here, South Korea. And it has shipped over $4.8 billion worth of steel to the U.S. in January to November last year. So just over $5 billion probably for the year, 14% of its global exports. One of the things that I've picked up and understood is Trump has gone to South Korea and said, hey, we have 50,000 troops there. We have a major military presence. Yeah. Can you guys foot some of this bill? And my guess and speculation, knowing that this is going to impact South Korea specifically, that's part of the negotiation bargaining. That's speculation, but I have to think that's part of what Trump is working towards.
Aside from the tariffs, Elon Musk and his Doge are also going to town.
I mean, here's what's funny is I don't know if it's more of what he's uncovering or the fact that he's doing it with a band of, 4 or 5, 19 to 20-year-old geniuses that people are more upset about. And it's just like, since when did we become so, I guess, infatuated with hierarchical, again, it's just a classic display of, it can't be that way.
No, and especially with technology these days and artificial intelligence and how quickly these young geniuses who really engineers that know computer science can dissect all of this tons of
Yeah.
information. It's like, who cares if we can do that so quickly and efficiently? And when was the last time we audited our own system, right? Our own government?
Never.
And
Never.
we found ourselves in this, what, $36 trillion
I mean, here's what's $36 trillion deficit. And the crazy thing is, and again, are people more upset that they're stopping some of this is the way it's been transactions in order to get to the bottom of it? Or are they more upset with, they're going to discover the corruption? Last week I commented a little bit on this, and we might have talked about it a bit later in the week. I saw a Instagram post from Melissa Urban. So Melissa Urban is the founder of Whole30, has written several books, and she was just appalled that they would stop funding to USAID. And my opinion on that is, hey, whoa, time out. Just because they stop funding on USAID does not mean that you can't give your money to an organization today to go take care of and give aid. Convoy of Hope is an organization that I'm familiar with. Hal Donaldson, the CEO, has joined me on the podcast. They do amazing amounts of aid work throughout the world. Yeah. If you are that bothered by it, then go give them your money rather than giving it to the government. And here's an amazing thing. It's a tax write-off. So in other words, you give them your money, it's no different than you paying your taxes and they take your money. So this, I guess, idea that people are now upset, and I understand there's a tail to it. Like, there's a lot of agricultural products that get bought by USAID that end up giving to countries. And I have no doubt once those are verified as legitimate, they're going to take place again, because that's, I think, what everyone believes that we would do to aid people around the world, not pay for transgender education in Afghanistan.
Yeah, the USA thing's obviously been probably the latest bombshell, and Trump said he's going to go after an audit education system. The latest one, and I'll go back to USAID in a minute because it's interesting, but the latest one was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. And for those that don't know, the CFPB, so this is what they're responsible for. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is an independent agency of the United States government that protects consumers from unfair financial practices. What does it do? Protect consumers from unfair, deceptive, and predatory practices by financial institutions, enforces consumer financial laws, provides educational materials to help consumers understand their rights and responsibilities, and accepts complaints for consumers against financial products and services, and then monitors the marketplace. So it monitors the marketplace, which our financial services providers are following the law. I'm interested also there. Anything to do with like finance, banking, like that's another interesting area that I'm looking as I'm always on the computer, Tyler, as you know, looking if breaking news on these different areas. And
here's the challenge, and I know you shared with me. We looked at a Forbes article this morning and said, not so fast, right? A classic Lee Corso, not so fast. And they tried to poke holes in saying, well, like for example, one of them, Chelsea Clinton didn't really get $84 million. There was a small, $1 million or $2 million that went to the Clinton Foundation that actually went to aid in Zambia or somewhere. I may be off on the country, but here's where, and kind of a thought of mine.
Yeah.
It's never so as it seems. And I think that was Mark Twain who coined that. It's meaning it's not exactly the way that they tell you it is or what it is. And we saw that, I think, in the different commentary from Trump at times, is people get so upset because he is sarcastic and he's a little bit overboard. And they're like, well, he's just lying. And I'm like, all right, fine, you can call it that way. But every time your buddy talks about a 24-inch fish that they caught that's like this, are you going to call them out the same? No, you just understand that's who they are, whatever. There's like some truth in the explanation. Of the truth.
Like it's true, but he exaggerates.
Yeah, and that is who he is. Yeah. At the same point, I think that's where you have to guard against, it's maybe quite not what it seems, but they're coming up with these numbers, the billion dollars of waste into these entitlement programs each week, which are like Social Security payments paid to people that are dead. Like they've continued those paying, haven't shut them off. And they're coming to that number for a reason. But I would say this, and just as much as people want to in the comments blow me up about, oh, you're just lifting up. No. I'm saying that, you have to somewhere in the truth. Well, at the same point, during the previous administration for 4 years, we were told everything is awesome, like an ongoing, just repetitive Lego movie. Over and over and over, everything is awesome, everything is awesome, everything is awesome. And we're like, it doesn't feel like it's awesome.
Well,
and I think the truth is somewhere in between the two of these. And I think it's pretty easy to understand because of all of the pushback. Oh, there's some real corruption there.
There's definitely, I mean, the USAID stuff, and not that USAID is going to go away. Either they will shut it down or they'll replace the people that were committing this fraud. But just $20 million.
They said they're going to go from 10,000 employees to 294.
There you go. Well,
if you can get rid of 9,706 employees for an organization, there's two things going on. I have no doubt in my mind, Elon is saying we need better tech that takes care of a lot of jobs. That's simple. That is the world of AI. You want it, that's how it shows up. Number two is there's probably a lot of people that, through different either unions or different circumstances, they can't let go, that haven't done their job in months, if not years, because that's kind of what's going on in our country.
Well, some of the biggest, most egregious ones, it was $330 million was given to Afghan crop production. What do you think that crop is in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, here's the thing is I would believe at some point that was destined for, that's a good thing. Hey, we're going to grow more wheat. We're going to grow potential other crops. No, I understand that. But that's what I'm saying is I think it was probably, thinking, this is a good way to do it. But as corrupt as it is in the way that we left the country and saw the absolute power vacuum, that every dollar of that went to generate poppy, the opioid crisis, and fund Al-Qaeda, Taliban, all those things. You would be, I think, ignorant to not think a lot of that money made it into those hands.
Another. This is to Iraq. This is a total of $450 million was given for an unbuilt dam and an unused road. $450 million. It's just like these numbers are outrageous, right? This is taxpayer money going to these programs.
Well, I mean, I think the challenge is people are like, okay, well, we're 36 trillion. Yeah, 36 trillion is added up one penny at a time. That was another thing that Trump finally shut down yesterday during the Super Bowl, said, hey, we're no longer printing pennies. Whatever pennies are out there, but it costs us 2 cents to make a penny for 1 cent. That doesn't make sense. Puns intended.
And to your point, you say this a lot. Like, I really, this isn't a left or right thing. It's more of like, let's get control of our spending and really finally figure out what the hell we spend all of this money on.
There's a challenge for me here to think that if I were sitting down with a political opposite, right? I would say someone that is just right on the other side of the line. And they were like, this is wrong. They shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, but why? Maybe you have it where in your bank account, you don't have to balance your books. You never have your accountant that says, hey, you need to record for all your expenses. Maybe you don't live in that world. Okay, but why shouldn't we allow someone and implore someone to go through this budget that we fought for decades? Right. This government budget that every term is a major fight. How do we balance the budget? And, I've said this, I believe this is, there's a point of cutting your expenses, making sure, hey, let's make sure things are being spent right. And once that's done, if it's not enough, well, don't just start cutting things like, I'd really love to do that, but we just don't have the money for it. No, go figure out how to make more money. Yeah. It's state of Washington. we've talked a bit about on our private channel about Washington. It's shown up continually. The state of Washington has a $12 billion deficit. In 2024, they had greater tax income than ever before. And they are complaining, saying we don't have enough money to pay for all of our. And it's like, if I look at what's going on in DC, I can't help but think it's happening in this state so much, especially when you have the governor who has refused to be interviewed in his 22 days in office. He has not gone on any news programs, refused to even sit down for a news conference, refused. And the Senate Majority Leader, who comes out last week and blasts Trump for signing the Title IX executive order, reaffirming the Title IX, which was that you can't have, this sexism, sex biased in education and sports, really protecting what so many individuals fought for in the 60s and 70s, that women would have a safe place to play sport. Trump signs in that order. The Senate Majority Leader in Washington says, we are going to fight it. We're going to have lawsuits against it, and goes on to say that in the state of Washington, parental rights, meaning that you have rights over your health care or anything about your children at the age of 13, do not exist. You have no rights to your children. None. And he goes on to say is, if you can get pregnant, then you can determine what happens with your body.
And I showed my wife's a Democrat, voted registered Democrat, and I showed her that video, and she was like, no way, like that. I don't agree with that.
That's the state I live in now.
Yeah,
and it's gotten crazy town.
And it is crazy. And I've been thinking about that question you had of like, are they afraid of what they're exposing, right? And I think they are, right? I think people, the Democratic Party and people, and even probably in the Republican Party, are a little afraid of like exposing.
Yeah, I think it's bipartisan, because there's been Republicans that have pushed back too. And there's no doubt in my mind, it does not matter across party lines. There are people that are making money nefariously, meaning
100%.
They're making money illegally. They have some sweetheart deal, as it's been said, to make money. And they're like, oh, this is going to stop my gravy train.
And finally exposing, just like allowing the American citizens to finally be transparent with us of like, all right, this is where all the money's going. And then, okay, either us, as American citizens going, okay, opening our eyes up to and be like, it's voting power, right? I think they're afraid of losing votes based
that's
on
100%.
Based on what they're exposing of like, wait, my party's spending money on this, and they can go both ways, right? And
I think that's what's been so challenging here the last, I would say going into this last election last November is, we have this major challenge in representatives, Senate, I would say gubernatorial. I don't think presidential was so much the way as it kind of went down, but you have, these leaders who kind of turn their eye to their constituents because they're more focused on the dollars, and they know if they have the dollars, they can overwhelm the market. And if they stand up for what my constituents want, but it's not going to bring me the dollars, then I no longer have business. I'm no longer in play. It's like, I forget exactly who it was. I saw it this morning. It was someone involved in this corruption situation. They're making like $187,000 a year. When they started into this role, it was roughly, 10, 15 years ago, they had a pretty substantial net worth of $6 million. They make $180,000 a year, and now their net worth is over $60 million.
And that's Nancy Pelosi is another good example of this. They made, I don't know if you saw this, it was either Barstool Sports or like somebody.
I tell you what, Dave Portnoy is on a run.
Portnoy,
yeah, he's on a run.
And like following all of her trades on the stock market. It's like unbelievable how much insider trading goes on with with people in the government and how much money they're making. Unreal.
I think that's where this is the big story that's to come, is how unfettered is the US government. And it takes an outsider who, didn't have a career in politics, Trump, and Elon, who didn't have a career in politics, to come in and say, I don't give two rips about whether you like me or not, which is a tremendous element of leadership. Now, there's a way to go about it, but there's also a point of saying, hey, I'm going to do what's right. And I know this is going to cost me in the court of public appeal, but it's what that needs to be done that is right. So I may be convicted in the court of public appeal, but I'm going to be safe in regards to other things. And I'm not saying what they're doing right, wrong, different, but it's like, it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to uncover corruption and say, what money are we spending and for what?
And, I always find it interesting because there are a large contingency of people, and I'm trying to figure out if it's like, it's got to be media driven, right? That absolutely think Trump and Elon are the most vile, venomous humans on planet Earth. And
how many of them drive Teslas? I just want to know that.
Right.
I just want to know.
It's like, even if you dislike them for whatever reason, and really just try to do some research, they seem like good dads. They have good families. Like, I think there's things like you just don't know about. They're humans, and to have that just immediate take on them, it removes like any critical thinking of like, all right, well, like, why do they hate them? Like, what's so bad about it? Let me just do some research. And I just don't understand that point of view. Before I kind of come to that conclusion, it's like, let me do my own gathering of intel.
Well, but I think that's where we've gotten to in our country. And, it was one of the Super Bowl ads.
Did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did. I was surprised. Hey, I was glad the Eagles won. Good for them. I mean, there was no doubt there. I was a little, I thought the Super Bowl commercials were going to be better. There was a report that Elon had spent $40 million of his own money, and it was going to, expose all the corruption and waste that he's found so far. I didn't see any of those. I don't know if they were there. I didn't see any.
I didn't see that.
But there was a commercial with Tom Brady and Snoop Dogg. And they were saying things about, I hate you because of the color of your skin. Just these things. And they're saying, it's sad when you say these words out loud, it's just crazy. And it was well intended as far as, to stop racism and stop hate. It's great. The thing that I really took from that, though, in this conversation about Elon and Trump, is we've been conditioned that if anyone has a portrayal of what you believe to be the center of oppression, they are wrong. I had this conversation with a friend last week. We got into in regards to the I think I made a story about it. The idea of DEI and the fact that it's so many people are upset and sad that they're getting rid of the offices. And one of the things that I shared with her is my experience from one of my podcast guests, Gil Winch, who said, hey, you can't tell the bouncer at the door to start selecting different people and think that's the solution that is going to allow for diversity, equality, and inclusion. Because when the bouncer is at the door, you're still excluding people. And, my take on it, we've talked about this before, is that DEI it became I'm going to right all these centuries of ills of racism and everything else, and I'm going to say that the only racist people are white men. That's what happened in a lot of situations. You can trust me, you can believe that, you can think differently, that's okay. But as a middle-aged white man, for so many instances, myself and my counterparts and friends, that's how it was portrayed. You are the problem, shut up, sit down, be quiet. We're going to bring in people of different ethnic, different educational, that are, different, because we have to right all of these wrongs. And, the conversation there was not what it's about. Man, I believe it should be all based on value, meritocracy again. Can you do the job or not? Coming back to the Elon and the everyone being upset that they're 19, 21, 25-year-olds, that is discrimination. The fact that you're upset, believing they can't do the job, they're not old enough. But yet no one wants to believe that, because in their right mind, it should be someone that looks like me. Right. And, I just, here's a take on it. Granted, our president is a white male. The two announcers yesterday for the Super Bowl are both white men. I don't know if you watched the halftime show.
I did.
And it struck me. It didn't, I don't care. There was not a dancer, was not one dancer who was of a different race than black. All of them were. And I stopped talking about it. I don't care. That's great. And Kendrick can select whoever he wants. That's his choice. Good for you, dude. If you like the performance, awesome. But I also sit here and think, hey, if we had a performer who was a white male, female, whatever, and 100% of their dancing crew, every support was white, we would not hear the end of it today. And that's the problem, is you can't have both ways. Just be blind to it. And, coming back to the Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady, it's like, yes, you need to say that stuff, but it's not one-sided. And I appreciate the fact that the both of them were saying it's not one-sided. And so when we get back to why do people, feel so offended by Elon and Trump? And it's, I think, because they've been conditioned for so many years. That is the poster child of what's wrong in the world. White men.
Well, no, it's funny. My wife and I were watching it, and we had the same thoughts. Like and it was just a take, right? Of like, yes, if it were the opposite, it would be huge news, headline news. And I like Kendrick Lamar. I think he's great. I thought the show was okay. But it was like whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. There's like these double standards a lot of the times, and I get the history of this country and
totally. I'm not.
It's just,
I would not.
It's just more of like, that's his choice and who he chose. But
great.
It goes back to the media, Tyler.
And that's where it centers. Yes,
right. It's and you saw just some of the wrinkles of it with USAID, of these kickbacks to CNN, to Politico, to these different media agencies to support or
confirmed or alleged.
Yeah.
Because, again, there's an article saying, oh, this wasn't really the case, which makes you like, really? Like, did they just decide to make all this up out of, blue, knowing that someone's going to go search it? Come on, man.
And I think that's as much, Elon Musk. Okay. He from my research on him, watching a lot of his interviews, what he does, he really doesn't give a flying flip of what people think of him. Like, he's got the most money out of anyone. He's got big businesses. Like, he seems to just want to tell it as it is. Like, this is what I found, whether he ruffles any feathers on whatever side. And so I have to look at it and be like, all right, they found something. And you're going to have, again, the media write these misinformation articles of like what is truth and what is not. And that's been the problem.
Here's the context that, again, deeper kind of goes into the pushback of Elon. Elon is the epitome of the American dream. A family that, was they first lived in Canada, and then they immigrated from Canada to South Africa, from South Africa to the US. Created, his family didn't have like this tremendous wealth, nest egg, nothing. He was the one that just built it, willing to do the work and built it. And, there's been other examples of that in American history. I think of, going back to the turn of the 20th century, guys like, Andrew Carnegie, like these examples. And yet you have people that fight it because they don't want to believe it's possible, because they see someone put in the effort and work, and they're saying, well, there had to be an exclusion, as opposed to, yeah, no, it is what it is. So why be so upset?
And yeah, that's true. It's like no one really uncovers like the journey the person went through to get to where they are. I have friends in Miami, in Florida, um, grew up in poverty stricken homes, abuse, all those things, everything against them, poor, um, worked really hard, and became multi-billionaires. And they have great philanthropic work they do. Donated a bunch of money to build parks in Miami, and got intertwined with this whole political um, you know, corruption case that they had nothing to do with. But then again, the media writes about, oh, this, billionaire family, with all this privilege, blah, 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 doing all this bad stuff. Meanwhile, they did nothing wrong. All they did was trying to donate. They had nothing to do with this corruption case. But again, it's the media not knowing anything about these people, writing all this false information. And this is like, I have firsthand, experience with them. And it's just unbelievable. It just goes on and on and on with everything. And it's like, again, that's why, Tyler, I think podcasting and us being able to do this, and others out there, why the people really have spoken loudly of like, all right, we don't know who to trust. I trust podcasters more than I do traditional media, whether it's
I mean,
or,
that's
or cable.
Yeah, I mean, that has been we saw that during the election.
Yeah.
With the different podcasts, and what I think it really separated themselves between the ones that were, I would say, classically unbiased, as opposed to the ones that were extremely biased. Joe Rogan Experience has been it's so funny talking to my son. He's like, Rogan used to be a comedian. Like, yeah. He used to host Fear Factor and be on these. He was on, what was the show? He was an actor too. He was on one of the, was it Spin City, or one of those like what do I want to say? Like a normal broadcast channel comedies.
I'll find out.
Yeah, and then he kind of just kind of worked through the system, and it's interesting because he really never did anything to set him apart. Him being a part of the UFC, just as an announcer, he was just around people, and it created this opportunity. And then how many ever years ago his podcast started, and he just talked about the stuff that he wanted to talk about with the people that were willing to come and talk about him. And eventually people are like, oh, he's willing to talk about anything. And I think it's picked up steam in the last year because of the downfall of media. And people are like, it goes back to the Kash Patel confirmation hearings.
Yeah.
When, one of the senators is like, wait a second here. You were kind of this conspiracy theorist, and all of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. I guess we need different conspiracy theorists. And it's just, that's what's happened, to where you have seen these public figures that have created platforms that to have this conversation and fetter some of this out. Is it true? Is it not? Like, let's get to the real bottom of it, as opposed to turning on to CBS, NBC, whatever channel it may be, and thinking, oh, they're telling me the truth.
Yeah. And for so long, as technology's gotten incredibly, accessible, and just, our phones are the fastest thing in the world. You can get anything from it. Going back to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, through the 90s, and really up and even to the early 2000s. I mean, that was really the only way to get information.
Yeah.
How easy was it to just blatantly lie to us, and we would have no idea? How would we ever know?
Yeah. Well, and that's what's happened with the advent of the internet, and again, the free based platforms. And, it's where the challenge of free speech, and, it's obviously a constitutional right. And yet some people are so afraid of it because it does expose corruption. And, it's easier to live in a state controlled media in like some of the other countries. And you look at what happens in Russia and the oppression there. It's like they control it all.
China, obviously,
absolutely,
North Korea, and other places.
Totally.
Yeah, no, it's true. Where do you think? Obviously, we're going to have some court hearings, I think, coming up in the next couple hours. because they want to try to block Doge and some of this
Yeah.
access that they're given. What's your take there? Like, are they just going to plow ahead and just say F it?
Man,
Or do they
I think that is very much when you look at this would be my take on it. You have individuals like Elizabeth Warren, who I think has been the most outspoken to say,
I
along with
wonder why.
the entire, I would say representative branch in states like Washington, where they want to fight all of this because they want to protect their small minority of constituents that are either so far from a progressive liberal extent, disregarding the entire rest of their constituency that has other thoughts and beliefs. They've just totally turned their blind eye to them.
Right.
And they want to do whatever to save face. And that's where it is going to be. It's like when the governor of Washington was elected, and in his acceptance speech for winning, he said this: I led the charge nationally in filing lawsuits. We had 36 lawsuits against Trump in the last time he was president. I will do the same, if not more, this time.
And how much money is wasted for this?
Well, and you have a state where 45% of the citizens of this state voted for Trump. What a bigger middle finger to say, I don't care about any of you, than to come in and say, you elected this guy president. I'm going to do everything I can fight. 55% of the people voted for you. Okay, great. But at that same point, why don't you represent both of them? Hey, you know what? I want to hear and I want to understand. I'm going to represent the state. No, you chose to represent whatever your personal beliefs and or the most money coming to you. And I think with Warren and some of these there's other states. I know Massachusetts is similar. You really kind of look at it and say, man, are we looking to say, how can we progress forward? Or are you doubling down on the hate that you've built a career out of, and trying to convince everyone else they're wrong?
Yeah. And Tyler, you being there, I mean, how do you feel? What are you and your wife going to do? Are you going to stay? I know, like, what do you do? Are you is it that bad?
Here's what, so when this last week came out, my kids are 18, 16, and 15.
Yeah.
Right. My oldest, she graduates high school in a couple months. My other two have, 2 and 3 years. And as I was talking to this with a couple of my friends, and their kids are much younger, each one of them have daughters who are under the age of 6. And I said to them, I feel horrible for them, because my belief, if this continues, is your daughters will be expected to compete against biological males, and everyone will think that's okay. And I said, that's what hurts me. That's what, is difficult. Then you layer in, when you have someone that's saying that 13 and above, they can go to school and have someone try to convince them to do whatever with their body if they're over 13, and there's no recourse, none at all. They are just pedophiles and, whatever, no big deal, because they've essentially said that that's okay, and your child can fall into that, and you as a parent have no rights to stand against it.
That's unbelievable.
None.
Just
And
and
the
if
only
you're not a
way,
parent, you don't get that. Like, I could
yeah,
never
and I
imagine that.
think
Like,
that's where, it's interesting. We moved here in 2009, and seeing some of the transition in the government, and understanding some of the governors. It is not the state we moved to as far as being fairly conservative. It was pretty inexpensive compared to California. Now it's one of the most expensive states in the country to live in by far, from a cost of living, taxing, all those things, and it's still not tipping the balance. Here's where I look at it, and this is a consideration. Both my parents retired, collecting Social Security, living off of retirement, all those things. They've lived here in Spokane for 5 going on 6 years. And I'm stopping and I'm thinking about that, is like, man, their cost of living that has gone up so dramatically. And even if, fixed income, if it's just a few $100s a month, that's a lot for someone that's not looking at, trying to get extra work, do other things. And I look at it saying, man, I'm starting to feel bad for them. They came here to live close to my kids, watch my kids be involved in their activities, all those things. And it's like, man, it's costing them a lot of money to do that, as opposed to move 30, 40 miles east of here and be a
Idaho.
completely different cost basis. Yeah, Idaho.
Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I get it. It's a tough decision. I mean, yeah, I don't know if once the government kind of starts interfering with my children and my personal life and how I can or can't know information about them, like that's just crossing the line, man. It's unbelievable.
well, what's interesting is my sister-in-law, who lives in Australia, was in town visiting here over the weekend. And we were kind of discussing this and talking about it and, just asking, in Australia. So my nephew and nieces are both dual citizens. They were born in Australia, and talking about that. And she said, I think at the age of 14, individuals have health rights there. And the only way parents can see whatever's going on from a health point of view is if the 14-year-old adds them to their account. So much like HIPAA here, and it's like, oh, okay. It's a very liberal, progressive country in a lot of ways too. And it's like, that's where it is there. And my contention, I think I've shared this with you. I shared this with friends. I told her, it's like, if you're going to go to the extent of what you've said, that a 13-year-old can do whatever their body, however they want. Okay, if that's the decision you want to make, then make them adults. If that's what you want to do, make them adults. They can buy alcohol, they can buy cigarettes, they can vote, they can do all the things, all those things. Yeah, if that's the way you want to go, then say at 13 you're adults. Because you're essentially trying to tiptoe into it. And yet, if you were to present that to them, oh my goodness, no, we can't do that. I mean, we just saw in the last handful of years that you can't buy cigarettes until you're 21. But you're saying, hey, we don't care if you have a sex change or go get pregnant or do whatever at 13. All cool, but yet, hey, we don't want you to buy cigarettes till 21.
Or just any sort
I'm not trying to justify one or the other, but I'm saying they just don't match. Your rationale does not match.
Yeah, or just any sort of mental health issue that the school knows about, and they're not going to tell the parent that's taking care of them for their whole life. They gave birth to them.
They go, the bed they sleep in, all of those things.
That I've slept in my bed for 6 years until, it's like.
And I think it's hard because, you know what, there are a lot of, I would say, youth that do get abused at home. Yeah, and I get that. I understand that. And I know there's situations where, I would say kids, for lack of a better term, kids find a safe place in a counselor or whatever else about abuse situations. And I understand that element of it.
Yes.
Yet, in the absence of that, the lack of information, and that's what it makes a difference. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, it's got to be X, Y, and Z. I can understand there are situations where it can be prudent to, I can get it. But just to unilaterally and out on an end and use it as a basis for your justification of a very, very small segment of individuals, man, that's hard.
Better processes. If a kid is going through something like that in an abusive household, parents that are just doing the wrong things, there should just be a better process of like reporting them to the authorities and those situations where
that would take money, and you'd have to not give your puff pieces that are in major news media the money instead of putting it towards people that can actually help.
Yeah, it's crazy.
On that note.
On that note, hey, you know what? I did over the weekend. I put in one of those ice baths in my patio.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Did a little cold plunging, huh?
I haven't. I was going to do it today at some point. I got a little bit of a cold. Right. I caught it from the kids. So I'm going to cold plunge at some point.
All right. Well, I will send this to you. My friend Justin Roethlingshofer, who's a guest on the podcast,
Yeah. I
he
remember him.
just released he sent out the newsletter. I'll try to put in the link where he shares the best way to cold plunge, to use sauna. He has a great kind of a layout of how and why. And one of the biggest things that I learned from him is people just arbitrarily cold plunge. And I have a friend, Matthew Chenard. I think he's like over 6, 7, 8 years every single day. He lives in Canada. There's times it's like 20 below Celsius, and the dude's cold plunging. And what Justin shares is using cold plunge as a tool for recovery.
Yes.
Base it off your heart rate variability. So he goes, if your heart rate variability is above the 10-day average, cold plunge all day long. If it's below that, your body's saying, hey, I'm not recovered. Sometimes that additional stress of cold plunging can be too much. That's what his research, that's what he does. I'll share it with you. We'll also make sure it's in the show notes. Yeah.
I love it.
Cool. Until next time, thanks for being here. Remember to subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the little subscribe button as well as the bell so that you get notified each time we release new content. Remember as well, the Impact Driven Leaders Summit, May 7th and 8th in Spokane, Washington. Would love to see you there with us. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.